Okay, we're going to start drilling the top holes for the controls, the pots, volume and tone. Now notice on your pots, some of the shafts will have a larger diameter rim at the bottom. It's a little larger than what the actual shaft is, so be sure and get your drill bit sized to that so that the pot will sit as flush to the back as it can. Now refer to your top hole layout for your measurements, and be sure and double check these on your guitar. If your actual shape varies a little from mine, you may want to make some adjustments here. And also make sure that if you curved your guitar a little differently, make sure the pots don't fall in an area that has a severe curve to it. You want it in an area that's as flat as you can out toward the edges. And you can see how I've got these pretty close to the edge here and in a pretty good flat area. If you get them up toward closer to the center, it may be a little too thick there to actually get the pot clamped down with the washer and nut. And I'm going to go ahead and drill out the holes for the 2 volume and 2 tone controls. Okay, now we're going to switch to a drill bit that'll fit the shaft on the pickup selector switch. It's a pretty large hole typically, and just make sure that you're wide enough that those threads will come up through the wood. Mine ended up being a 7/16. And now this switch is actually located a little closer to the center. So we kind of have to be careful again on that layout and make sure it's in a flat spot. You can see here it's in a little thicker area, but it's still relatively flat. I'm just going to smooth out these holes a little bit with some sandpaper. And now we've got a little work to do on the back side of this, especially for the pickup selector switch. That little section there can be a little thick for the threads. You might not have any threads showing on the top. So I'm going to carve out a little bit here so that it can sink a little more into the wood. And we'll have some threads on the top that we can bite into. And I'm just using a small chisel just to take out a little bit of wood around that hole. And then you can see here how I've got plenty of room for the washer and the nut to go on top now. Okay, now you see that your pot has a little tab on it. Now this tab becomes pretty important with this kind of guitar. What we're going to do is cut a little slot for that tab to fit in, so that when we're assembled and we put the wiring and the pots in place, this tab will allow us to put the nut on the top without the pot moving. So you can see here I've just sort of marked the location where that's going to be. And I'm going to take just an X-Acto knife or any kind of razor knife, and I'm just going to start cutting a little slot out in the wood there. You can see I'm going to get it to where it's deep enough that that'll fit flush with the wood. You may have to cut a little more out here. It's also got to be wide enough that the whole tab will fit inside it. And just test the fit and make sure that you're getting it flush with the back. And then do that with all 4 holes. And now we're going to move on to the output jack, which goes, I actually put mine on the side of the guitar. A lot of guitars of this style can also have it on the top if you wish. On your layout you'll get the measurement of how far that is from the center line on the bottom. I'm just going to measure that length out on a piece of paper. And I'm just going to use the paper as sort of a flexible ruler. I'm going to line one edge up on the center line. And then just mark on the side where our output jack location is. And I'm going to square that up with the top of the side. And then I'm going to find the midpoint of that line. And that's where our output jack will be. And again, this is kind of like the pots before. There's usually a little rim at the bottom that's the widest point on that shaft. And now remember that side's pretty fragile, so be careful drilling that hole out. And now you'll probably have a situation like mine where the kerfing's kind of in the way of the output jack. So I'm just going to kind of trace out where that extra wood is. And then just take a small chisel and start chipping out that excess wood. And again, remember that side's thin, so just be careful not to do any damage to it. And then test your jack in that hole and make sure it'll get flush with the side. and also that you've got a little room there for your wiring to connect. Okay, and now I'm going to line up the center block and the side assembly on the top of the guitar, and I want to draw in where the center block ends on the top. I'm just going to cut that excess wood off here. And then I'm just going to kind of file it nice and square and get any of the irregularities from the saw out. And just smooth that line out. Okay, now I sort of clamped the neck in place, lining it up with the center line on the arch top and making sure it's centered on the front and back side of this arch top. And now once you've got it centered, I'm just going to trace out the outside of that tenon. And then I want to take a triangle here, and where the fretboard stops, I'm just going to make a mark there on the arch top. Now I can remove the neck. And then from that mark, I can draw a line straight across where the end of the fretboard will be. And now I'm going to cut out this little section here where the tenon will be. And now I'm just going to take a chisel and get a little closer to that pencil line. Smooth it out so that I can get the tenon to fit in that slot. And here I'm just going to redraw the center line on that tenon. Make sure that my slot's accurate, and I'm going to mark where the edge of the neck hits on the outsides there. Draw that line square with the top of the arch top. And then again, extend that line on out, and then we can go ahead and cut the entire slot for the neck. Just to go over that, we cut the tenon slot out first so that we could get an accurate line up with the center line to mark where the outside of that the outside of where that neck slot's going to be. Okay, and then we have the finished neck slot. I'm just going to double check that fit. And you can make any adjustments you need here. Make sure everything stayed centered. And then just smooth these lines out with the chisel as well. I'm just going to verify that fit one last time.